years ago. And now I'm ripping up for the never switching up gears, got a couple of years to go. Here we go. As soon as you hear that go, Liverpool to Portsmouth, yeah, that chorus got the crowd screaming. I got the people screaming.
Hello everyone and welcome into another edition of NFL Team Breakdowns. The Kansas City Chiefs are the next team we're going to be covering tonight. Alongside me, Nick Rice. This is our sixth show, and Nick, it's been pretty exciting, but we get to cover the AFC West. I know one of your favorite divisions to talk about, because guess what our next team we're going to be covering?
It's the San Diego Chargers. We're going to be referring to them a number of times tonight. Robert, glad that we could both join here for yet another edition of NFL Team Breakdowns. Make sure to tune into all of the shows on Spreaker.com, an affiliation of National Sports, as we should be back close to every other night here with more breakdowns as we get you started for the beginning of the regular season.
Nick, let's get it started. 2013 shocked a lot of teams. They got a new head coach. Got a quarterback, Alex Smith, traded from the 49ers for draft picks. And Nick, I think this was a smart decision for the Kansas City Chiefs, getting a quarterback, getting an O-line established. Fisher was the man for the draft. He was the first-round pick, Eric Fisher, and was an offensive tackle. He was actually the left tackle last season and will be for this season. And, you know, Nick, I saw Jamal Charles had such a great season. He averaged 5 yards a carry and rushed for 1,287 yards. Alex Smith had 23 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. And Nick, a pretty exceptional season overall, especially with a defense that pretty much got to the quarterback a lot.
Yeah, Jamal Charles is basically in his 7th year out of Texas, perhaps the greatest running back. I put him at number 2, only behind the one, the only all-day Adrian Peterson. He had 259 carries for 1,287 yards and 12 touchdowns, and that's with basically having a limited passing game. Those Chiefs started the year 9-0, finished the season off a dismal 2-5 record, and then obviously they went 2-6 if you include the wild card game against the Colts. But overall, Kansas City looks very good, especially when Jamal Charles carries the football. That running game it's next to none as far as in this new passing league, as Jamal Charles and the Chiefs still a ground and pound ball club week in and week out.
And Nick, I look at their schedule, and you and me talked before this, but they only beat one playoff team, and Philadelphia wasn't really supposed to even be a playoff team until the later portion of the season. And then you go to, after the bye week is where they really did struggle. They went against Denver, San Diego, and Denver again, and they had 3 straight losses. And Nick, something about Denver they couldn't stop. You know, maybe they had a good pass rush, but I mean the O-line for Denver kept Peyton Manning in the pocket, kept them in the pocket, and kept on throwing that football. And San Diego matched up very well against the Kansas City Chiefs, and they only got the 2 wins against Washington and Oakland towards the second half of the season, and then lost to the Colts 23-7, and then played San Diego again, and San Diego got the big win in overtime, 27-24. And then Nick, you know, you go to this wild card game. You have no Jamal Charles and you have no Reggie Wayne for the Colts. What do you make of that game?
Well, obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs didn't really face extreme competition until Week 11 against the Denver Broncos, and as you could see, they were completely flat. They have no running game. The offense was not there. Denver prevailed, and that was one of 2 times where it was Kansas City who had no answer for what the Broncos were doing, as they fell behind early and were never able to come back and win that game. Manning was, basically on a passing clinic the entire day, and Alex Smith had more interceptions than touchdowns against the Broncos in 2 meetings. That was the real difference in those games, and overall, I think Kansas City has a coach that is going to give them more immediate wins, like that season where the Chiefs went 4-12 and turned it around, winning 11 games in one of the biggest turnarounds of the decade. And obviously, Kansas City, they'll be in the race for a number of years, but I think with Andy Reid, there's something about his aura and the way that he coaches that I don't think – it reminds me a little of a Marty Schottenheimer. You can't get rid of a guy who is so great to all of his players and gets the best out of his ball club. But in December and January, there's something about Reed that just does not relate to winning. That's how they went 2-6 down the home stretch. And in my mind, Robert, they may have the same exact fate this year, especially when the Chargers and the Broncos have gotten a heck of a lot better over the offseason.
Nick, I don't know if you remember, but remember when Alex Smith was in his prime in the 2010 season? I remember me and Steven actually went to the last game. It was supposed to be Alex Smith's last game of the season. You get a new head coach, you get Jim Harbaugh, signs him back and changes him into this brand new quarterback and makes it to the playoffs with Jim Harbaugh. And, you know, unfortunately they do lose they lose, but at the end of the day, you say Alex Smith had a way better season. He looked a lot better. Gets hurt with the concussion. Colin Kaepernick comes in, gets this new deal now this year, but Alex Smith, I'm glad he got to go to a team that really appreciates him, and he really proved himself this season, especially with 23 touchdowns. But the only concern I had, Nick, for this whole season, I would say Jamal Charles had the most rushing yards and the most receiving yards for this squad, and he caught 70 passes, targeted 104 times. Dwayne Bowe was targeted 105 but only caught 57. Is that a concern to you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm concerned with what the Chiefs are doing. And going into 2014, that passing game wasn't all that impressive earlier. And now not only did the division, but the remainder of their opponents did a better job concerning basically improving their secondaries and helping against these top receivers. And I don't think any team in the last few years have won with only one target being the main cognate of their offense. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Houston Texans with Andre Johnson, the Detroit Lions with a Calvin Johnson, and maybe the Philadelphia Eagles during the Deshaun Jackson era when they only had him as the main target. I think that the Chiefs need to spread it around, and I mean, a bunch of no-name receivers should be starting for these Chiefs this year. As you look at the depth chart, and obviously this is in pencil right now, but starting last year was Donnie Avery. He'll be back alongside of Dwayne Bowe. A.J. Jenkins, Robert, you know plenty about him. He's not exactly a go-to target anymore. And then Junior Hemingway, he should be the number 4 or number 3 target on that offense, receivers included. In my mind, a bunch of guys who basically are number 2s in the league.
And Nick, you know, one thing I've noticed about the wide receiver core, you know, you have Junior Hemingway, and he didn't really catch anything. He only had 13 catches. But he got 2 touchdowns. I mean, this wide receiver core got touchdowns. You had Dwayne Bowe had 5, but the most touchdowns on this receiving core was Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles had mostly everything in the rushing and the receiving, and that's something that I'm going to be worried about. You had Kanial Davis,
too heavily on him.
And the second string was Kanial Davis, but he didn't do that bad. He averaged over 5.5 yards per carry, and he got a touchdown, but Jamal Charles had double digits in that. So he had the most touchdowns pretty much in that rushing and receiving core combined. And Nick, it kind of scares me when you have Jamal Charles who had the most touchdowns in the running game. Actually, he had more than the whole running game combined because Alex Smith only had 1. Kanial Davis had 4. Jamal Charles only had 7. But if you combine Dwayne Bowe and Donnie Avery, they had 7 as well combined. And that, you know, Nick, Donnie Avery, he kind of has some issues, but I think Donnie Avery's going to be ready to go this season. I think this is a guy you're going to be looking to rely on a lot more. But without a Dexter McCluster, I'm a little concerned.
Oh, obviously, that's just a big minus. And when you have a running back converted receiver basically catch the second on your team in passes, Dexter McCluster, very early in his career, you know that you have a problem with your passing game. And they only addressed it with one free agent and draft signing. That was a Darryl Surgent later on in the draft. Obviously, not the kind of draft that you would love to have. I mean, basically, if you look at this Chiefs offense, it does not look like a winning formula. You have an Alex Smith who's going to do no more than prevent interceptions. Your running backs leading your team not only in running yards but in receiving yards and basically caught the most touchdowns. And then outside of a Dwayne Bowe, there's really no threat that scares you at all. Your starting tight end is a guy that the Dolphins got rid of, an Anthony Fasano, and then basically Niall Davis can check in as another wideout. It's just an interesting scenario. And outside of maybe an Eric Fisher who you can rely on, not a lot of strength there on that offensive side of the football.
And Nick, you look at their 2013 draft. Let's look at their first round pick, Eric Fisher, and this guy made the biggest impact. This O-line really came together, and they helped out Jamal Charles the whole way. That O-line gave Jamal Charles all those yards. It was all the halfback slip screens you could see, or even another halfback screen, but that's what Jamal Charles did pretty much throughout the whole season. Nick, you're probably going to agree with me on that, because if you saw the highlights throughout the Kansas City Chiefs season, it was all halfback screens for Jamal Charles.
Obviously, Jamal, he was the beneficiary of a great offensive line. I think Eric Fisher improved that unit that was average to below average. You put him in there, and all of a sudden he becomes a fantastic player. But Robert, I'm sure you'd agree with me. Not a whole lot of extra talent outside of this signing of Eric Fisher. I mean, obviously a penciled-in starter day one in the league, but really, you look at the rest of that draft, and not all too impressive there from last season, which really scratches my head as to how the Chiefs are going to come alive here in the next few years.
Well, they did draft Niall Davis, and, he kind of made an impact, but didn't really do that much, because they gave the ball to Jamal Charles the whole freaking season. That's all they did. Niall Davis barely got anything.
I do want to recognize Niall Davis. He should be the future big-time player here in the NFL. Reminds you a little bit of a Toby Gerhart, maybe a little more speed, but this guy can play. Watch out for him.
And Davis, I think this guy is going to be really good, but he's behind one of the best running backs in the game. It's kind of like the Toby Gerhart situation, where Toby Gerhart was behind Adrian Peterson, and now he's going to Jacksonville, where he's going to prove himself as an elite running back if he has the O-line to prove it. But, I think Niall Davis is going to be a good running back. I think you have to give him more carries. Jamal Charles got hurt, and Niall Davis kind of had to step in and lead that role as a rookie. But you should have let Niall Davis kind of progress and give more and more carries to him throughout the season. I think that's what the Kansas City Chiefs didn't do, and they relied on Jamal Charles throughout that whole season on the offensive side.
I know Andy Reid is and we'll get to this 2014 draft as a whole in a little bit, but I know Andy Reid's kind of will draft or get the best need or best player available, which is why in the 2014 draft, similar to 2013, they drafted a running back. They drafted some late offensive linemen. They drafted a little bit on defense, but they need wide receivers and they need a tight end, and they have neither, which really puts a huge strain on not only Jamal Charles, but Alex Smith, the guy that you're supposed to help. And I think that if you want to reach the next level, if you aren't going to have a top 5 quarterback like a Peyton Manning, you have to give your quarterback some help. And that's what the Chiefs failed to do. As just a quick overview of the 2014 draft. One more time, they draft a running back. They draft an offensive guard. Where's wide receiver in here? Where's a tight end? I see neither. It really puts a big-time strain on Alex Smith. And also, we may look at that free agent draft or free agency class as well. Not a whole lot of big-name guys there to help out Smith.
And one thing I want to know is we're going to go the 2014 draft picks, Nick. Let's go over them. Let's go over round 1. D. Ford out of Auburn. And this guy's a concern to me. I don't think this was a great first-round draft pick. He's missed games due to injuries. But there was one thing that was a positive. He was an MVP at the Super Bowl. He's not good at getting getting against the running back. But besides that, he can't get to the running back. But besides that, he's an explosive player. And he can flex around that O-line and get some sacks. This guy is good at getting sacks against quarterbacks, and that's what he did against Johnny Football, against Texas A&M. Watching some of those highlights was actually pretty awesome. He has relentless pursuit. He moves effective with positioning, and he anticipates every snap very well. And he has a long second step, and he actually beats blocks with quickness. So this guy does have speed, and D. Ford isn't going to start, though. That's the one thing I am really concerned with this defense, because you have You have Houston
Tomahawk Lee and Justin
Tomahawk
Houston.
Lee, and you have Houston, and that's something that you have to compete against. And that D Ford's your future, but you want a first round pick that's supposed to start for you, and that's what you got from Eric Fisher last season.
Obviously, D Ford would be behind the reins there a little bit, but I, to a degree, like the call because you know you're going to get a future starter because. Basically, the guys that you would love to have in front of you are a Tom Bahali and a Justin Houston, two of the best in the business. Also add in a Derek Johnson. This may be one of the better linebacker cores in the NFL right now. Three guys that can get after the quarterback, and obviously Derek Johnson that, basically a tackling machine and is still getting it done here in the National Football League. But when you look at the remainder of the draft, similar to D Ford, a lot of question marks. 6th round pick, they took Zach Fulton, offensive guard out of Tennessee. He's nothing more than really a project. Philip Gaines, does that really service a need that you had? That defense looked relatively well outside of the Colts game. But, you still have to figure that the starters are going to be a Brandon Flowers and a Sean Smith, penciled in right now as the 1 and 2. He's nothing more than a backup at the moment. And in my mind, I think the remainder of that draft, call me a pessimist, but for back-to-back years, Chiefs did a real questionable job there in the draft department.
Nick, but give him credit. I think running back from Oregon, DeAnthony Thomas, won't be a bad pick for them. But, they did get Niall Davis, and I think they're just going to keep on getting this young running back core. But, Jamal Charles still has a couple of years left in him. I guess when you develop Niall Davis and you're going to develop a DeAnthony Thomas, your running back core will be pretty solid. But, a Niall Davis, you need to progress him a lot more if you want to get him some more carries. You can't always give it to Jamal Charles.
Oh, yeah, actually, that's true. And another situation where they really drafted a player that they aren't going to use right away. We're breaking down the 2014 season, but if this were a breakdown of, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, we can talk about how 5th-round pick from Georgia quarterback Aaron Murray may make an impact. I love the pick because basically Andy Reid can put any quarterback and turn him into a great player. Just look at last year, what the Eagles had in the backfield. He was able to get the most out of a Michael Vick. The Eagles, Donovan McNabb. He was never really an all-star talent, but he got him to 5 NFC Championship games. I think that Andy Reid may make this backup quarterback, backup at the moment, turn into a real good starter there for the Chiefs in the future, Aaron Murray.
But was this a smart pick for them because you already have Alex Smith starting for you?
Obviously not. I think what the Chiefs should have done in round 1 is to trade down and take a wide receiver in the 2nd round, maybe a Marquise Lee, or what the Panthers did, take a Kelvin Benjamin. I think overall the Chiefs could have done a little better, but if D4 pans out, I think that they did just okay, which I don't think wins that AFC West. Last time I checked, the Broncos not only were good, but added potentially 4 or 5 defensive starters in free agency in the draft.
Yeah, Nick, the picks they have, they also drafted an offensive tackle, Devontae Tardif, and he's a top-ranked player in Canada, but, I don't think this guy's going to start at all when you have an Eric Fisher starting for you. And that O-line is pretty solid. As I said, it helped out Alex Smith and it helped out Jamal Charles in both of the needs, pass block and run block. It did both of that. So, I don't get why they're drafting more O-linemen. It's not making any sense to me.
I don't agree either against the top competition. You look at the Broncos. Basically, that offense looked real measly there. They lost to the Colts twice. That offense looked pretty bad, including Week 16, 23-7 was the score. In a couple games against real modest competition, they looked good. But even during that 9-0 start, you could just tell that the defense really had to carry the load, as they had a league record at that time, 36 sacks in 9 games. And that was how they were able to get to a good start. But, even then, the offense looked real lethargic against teams like the Jaguars, Eagles, Giants, Raiders, Texans, and Browns, throwing the Bills. That's their competition, and most of that was at home as well. The Chiefs did not do a good job. Sure, they went 11-5, but heading into this year, I mean, they were potentially the worst 11-5 team in the league, and nobody wants to take a look at them. But when you take a second long look at these Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, call me a pessimist now. I think that Kansas City's in some huge trouble.
Well, they're going against some great competition, and Nick, I want to talk about their free agent acquisitions. They had a Joe Mays, an inside linebacker, Vance Walker, Chris Owens, a cornerback. They had a Jeff Lindbach, who's a guard, and they also signed Corey Grissom. And going over their picks, I think the best one you can get out of these guys is a Jeff Lindenbach for that O-line. You just made that O-line look a lot more solid, and Jeff Lindenbach brings a lot to this table. And, you know, it's like he's like a second coming of Jeff Shorts in a way. I think this guy is going to really bring an impact. He's an athletic lineman who can rotate between guard and tackle, and you know, he's also capable, I think, of, you know, he's lining up on either side of the center, so you can go left guard and right guard, and I think that's something the Chiefs would really like to have. But I think also I think the nose tackle, Corey Grissom, is going to be a great free agent acquisition for them. You know, unfortunately, he has some injuries, but, I mean, this guy, he's a 316-pound guy. I think that can get a lot of good tackles, and he puts a lot of pressure on that O-line.
Obviously, Jeff Lickenbach has made his mark in the NFL. I like what the Chiefs did signing a Joe Mays, former Broncos linebacker. I think he'll be good. And then a Hussein Abdullah, who basically could be penciled in right now as the starter. You look at that depth chart at safety. Obviously, Eric Berry's the starter. But the backups for the Chiefs were a Malcolm Bronson and a Jaron McMillan. And sure, that defense looked relatively good. But against the Colts, I mean, they basically drugged them up and down the field, beating them from pillar to post. It was not even a contested game there in the second half. That defense looked real pathetic. But when you throw in a Hussein Abdullah, instant starter and impact player, I think he was potentially the best free agent acquisition. They needed offensive linemen. They got Lickenbach, a potential starter there at right guard. You pencil it in and play him immediately. But I also love Hussein Abdullah. Two guys, both Lickenbach and Abdullah, should be the two free agents that plug in and play right away.
Abdullah, I think, is really going to make an impact on that safety position, but I think you look at this Kansas City Chiefs defense, and they're more of the kind of the pass rush type of defense. They can get sacks, and that's what they're known for in this league. But Nick, I think we're gonna get down to that depth chart.
Yeah, when we look overall at the depth chart, a couple of questions, a lot of new names and new places, and overall I think Kansas City will look a heck of a lot different coming into the 2014 season. But one player that is going to stay the same, and what I believe will be a real good solution for a number of years, considering Kansas City has been real sad in this position early, is quarterback. And Alex Smith to throw in also an Aaron Murray, two guys that can plug in and play immediately. I think that quarterback position right away gets a B-. Just a real solid contribution there at the quarterback position.
I'm going to agree with you. I mean, Alex Smith, yes, he can get some good long passes once in a while, but you got to stop throwing that running back. And I think Aaron Murray was a good acquisition for this team. Also, you have a Chase Daniel right behind him, and a Chase Daniel I think is going to be the third string this year. I think Aaron Murray is going to battle it out for the second string, but I'm going to agree with you, Nick. I'll give him a B-.
Obviously, it'll be a little bit different of a grade there for the halfbacks there in Kansas City. Niall Davis, Jamal Charles, throwing a DeAnthony Thomas, three guys that can play away. And oh, shoot, we never mentioned him, but free agent acquisition Joe McKnight. A lot of speed there at the halfback position. And anything less than an A would be a real big disgrace and a disservice there for that halfback position.
Well, yeah, Jamal Charles got the most touchdowns in the running game and the receiving game. So I'm going to give the running backs an A. Let's move on to fullback. You got Sherman. And, he really helped Jamal Charles get the success. I'll give him an A-.
I'm going to have to disagree a little bit. I looked a little bit at what that offensive line, and they did a lot of single back sets, and a lot of what Jamal Charles did was based on the offensive line. I love Anthony Sherman, but he's not a top end fullback. I'm going to give him a B minus, and I think overall Kansas City may continue to go two halfback sets and a lot of three wide with Jamal Charles in the slot.
All right, well, let's move on to the wide receiver core. You have on the left side right now, you have Dwayne Bowe and Junior Hemingway. On the other side, you have Donnie Avery and A.J. Jenkins, and that's the first and second string guys. And Nick, this wide receiver core didn't really do that much. I mean, it was mostly Jamal Charles. I'm going to give him a C+.
I'm going to give him a straight C. I totally agree with you. Wide receivers far below what the rest of that division is doing there on that position.
And they didn't really do that much. I mean, it was mostly Dwayne Bowe, but out of all the wide receiver core, it was Dwayne Bowe that really did something. But besides that, you had Donnie Avery who didn't really do that much. But the weird part was to me is Dwayne Bowe had more targets, but only caught 57 passes.
Yeah. I mean, this guy drops passes left and right. He only had, he's been in the league for something like 7 or 8 years and has yet to even make himself even a real target. He's only gone to one Pro Bowl, and while he hasn't been a bust, he was a first-round pick for the Chiefs in 2007 out of Louisiana State. He's been far below par, and what's really disappointed me with the Chiefs is in the last 5 years, they have done very little to address that wide receiver position. A late-round pick, Junior Hemingway, is potentially the only other draft pick. Actually, I look at this. Donnie Avery, free agent acquisition. A.J. Jenkins, free agent acquisition. Kyle Williams, free agent acquisition. And you also throw in the other guys, and the only starter that they drafted over the last 7 years is Junior Hemingway, who basically is nothing more than a number 3 target.
And Kyle Williams is coming off an injury this season, so I don't know how he'll do. Because he didn't really play that much games.
A little bit.
Well, oh jeez, really, we're gonna start with this. You know what? That's the only reason why I lost to the New York Giants, because of Kyle Williams. Man. I'm sorry, I hate when a lot of people hate that you're gonna say that, but it's true. The offense was moving the ball, the defense was doing their job, and then the special teams messed it up.
Only one player. That's really unfortunate. Twice. Once is acceptable. 2, you let that thing go in the end zone. Who cares? Who gives a rip? Start at the 1-yard line. Better than a fumble. But,
that's true.
Nevertheless, he may be catching passes for Alex Smith on a regular basis next year, and that's not a recipe for success. I think we've been very generous to give him a C. When Jamal Charles is your best receiver, come on, man.
I know, you have a running back as your best wide receiver. Let's move on. Let's go to the tight end position. You have an Anthony Fasano and Travis Kelce, who's a second-year player. And Nick, this tight ends didn't really do that much either. I'm gonna give him a C minus.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with the C. Just real underwhelming, the targets there for the Alex Smith in his second year. Anthony Fasano, former Dolphins tight end, continuing to just be somewhat of an average target there for Alex Smith. Not a lot in the backup department. Anthony Fasano, in basically what is now his 10th year, going into his 10th, he had 23 catches for only 200 yards last year. That's less than 10 yards a catch as well, and only 3 TDs, which actually is better than a lot of the receivers. We're going to give him a C and a C minus. I think that's very generous.
All right, let's move on. Let's go to that O-line that gave the success to Alex Smith and Jamal Charles over this season. And Nick, I think you have to give these guys an A because they really helped out Jamal Charles in both the receiving and the running game with the halfback screens. When Jamal Charles went inside and pushed for yards and got the touchdowns, that was pretty much the O-line doing their job. And also Jamal Charles made some great moves. I look at Jamal Charles, he makes some great moves. He'll go left and right, he'll mess you up, and he'll do some turns that no one really expects you to do.
I mean, this may basically be the only time that we disagree on anything, but I'm actually going to give them not an A, but I'm going to give them a B minus. And hear me out here. When you look first and foremost, the Chiefs. I mean, you have to remember they played a lot of teams that, weren't even in the running for the playoffs. Secondly, when you look overall at the offensive side of the football, they ranked 21st in yards and 25th in passing yards, and they only ranked 10th in running the football. I mean, they weren't an elite offensive line by any stretch. Call me a pessimist. B minus I think is good for them, but Eric Fisher, an up and coming A plus caliber player.
I think I'm going to change my grade to a B plus. I mean, you did make a good point. They didn't really go against much competition, and
but
you're looking at it, the second half of the season was the only competition they had.
Yeah.
So I'll give them a B plus. Let's move on to our favorite side, our defensive side, this pass rush type of team. Nick, what do you give this D line?
Alan Bailey, Dontari Poe, and Mike DeVito are the starters. A real good, solid defensive front. I'm flipping a coin basically between a B plus and an A minus. This is basically an up and coming superstar defensive line, but I'm going to give them a B plus or a B minus. This should be one of the better units in the NFL, but there's not a whole lot behind them that really helps me be assured that they're going to do all that well, unless a D4 plays a little defensive line. But right now, he's penciled at linebacker. B plus, I think, is a good grade.
And I think Dontari Poe has really made the impact there on that D line, but we also signed a Vance Walker for you at that left side. I think that's going to make a impact, especially through that free agency. Nick, let's move on to the outside. Let's move on to the linebacker core for you.
What's your grade for the D lineman too, though?
The D line. I'll give him a B plus. B plus. B plus. Let's move on. Let's go on that linebacking core as I was saying. Let's go to a Justin Houston, a Derek Johnson, and Tomahawk Lee, and I'm forgetting someone. I'm sorry. Dang it! Why am I messing up here? Who's the left inside linebacker again?
We're left inside. Nico Johnson is inside. Justin Houston outside.
He's the new guy, right?
Yeah,
Nico Johnson.
This defense looks pretty good.
Yeah, I was gonna say this linebacking core is pretty awesome, especially when you have a Derek Johnson who's had over 100 tackles this season, and a guy that's really made an impact with 4.5 sacks and 2 interceptions. And you go to Tomahawk Lee that has 11 sacks for that linebacking core, but also you can add another 11 with a Justin Houston. And these guys pretty much had the same amount of tackles. Tomahawk Lee only had 2 more better, and 46 tackles for Hawley, and Houston had 44. But man, this linebacking core is gonna look pretty good next season.
Yeah, I give them a B plus. A real solid contribution. These guys are going to be up and coming real good. And look out for Joe Mays, a former Houston product, who's played with the Broncos as well. He should be a great backup player, along with a Frank Zombo. And then look at D Ford. Obviously, this unit not only has talent up top, but they're paying guys minimal money who are really going to make an impact there in the depth chart.
Yeah, Nico Johnson is going to be a second-year player, and he's going to be a guy he's going to be known. And that's gonna be great to watch for this up and coming team. Even though he only had a combined of 7 tackles, but I mean this guy is gonna be starting for you, and you're gonna see that left side linebacking core really come up and coming. Let's move on. Let's go.
Great again.
Let's go. The cornerback position. You have Brandon Flowers and a Sean Smith. And a Sean Smith who, this is kind of an average cornerback position. When you have a Sean Smith who had 2 interceptions, and then you go to a Brandon Flowers who didn't, Brandon Flowers who had 1 interception. They did alright, but Flowers made a lot of tackles. He had 68 tackles. He had 1 sack for the cornerback position, and then you go to Sean Smith, who really didn't make an impact to me. And I think the cornerback position is all right, Nick. I think it's concern to me that they don't have that one elite corner.
Right. I mean, call me a little bit low here, but I mean, when you have an Eric Berry, when you have that front seven that looks amazing, and you give up how many points to the Colts in the playoffs? I mean, when basically T.Y. Hilton, no Reggie Wayne, and a bunch of backups are torching this team like nobody's business. I mean, this may be based off of solely emotions, but I don't think Brandon Flowers has really emerged as the number one corner there, and I give it a C minus. I do. I give it a C minus. With all the talent there, they should play better. Now, obviously, if you say a higher grade, I totally agree, but I mean, I just think overall C minus may be about right. I mean, when the cornerback class is that much in front of them, come on.
Nick, actually, that was a voice crack. I'm sorry about that, but it happens. It happens. But my voice is getting better. My voice is going to be a lot better. I'm going to give him a D+. I think I'm going to give him a grade lower. Wow. I don't like their cornerbacks. This isn't one of my favorite cornerback type of teams. It's kind of a disgrace to me, in a way. It hurts inside. But Nick, I gotta give him a D+. That's probably my lowest grade I've given.
When you're in practice every day against basically the best receivers, Jamal Charles, I mean, not a whole lot going on there either. So they don't really have much competition every day in practice.
And Nick, I don't think did I give a grade for the linebacking core?
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't. I remember. I'll give them a B. I think because they can't really, I mean, they can get to the running back, but I'm still concerned because they're more of a pass rush type of defense, and that's why they drafted Ford to kind of help out with that pass rush defense.
Right.
So I'll give him a B. And the safety position, let's go with Hushain. How do you say it, Nick? I know you could say it right.
Hussein
Abdullah with an Eric Berry. Hussein Abdullah, he was a good free agent acquisition, but I don't know. I think this guy's going to make a little bit of an impact for that safety position. Then you also have Eric Berry, who's really helped down that strong safety with 3.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, and had 2 touchdowns and 74 tackles. So Nick, I think I'm giving him a B. I think they're going to be average this year in that safety position.
Yeah, I give him a B- because Eric Berry is going to be a real great player there at the free safety spot. He's up and coming. He's not an Earl Thomas, but they were taken around the same spot around the same year, and I think they're two of the same when you talk about overall safety play. You throw in an Hussein Abdullah, he may start, he may be pretty decent for you. He's not a superstar caliber player. He's not going to make Eric Berry turn into a 10 interception machine, but he'll be good for you. I think a B- is a real good spot to have him. And when you look overall at both the offense and defense, the offense for Kansas City, an underwhelming B-. It's mainly because of those receiving targets where both Anthony Fasano, the starter, and Dwayne Bowe, the starter, have really underwhelmed the last few years. And then when you take a look at the defense, the secondary looks far below par, which is why we give that defense a B- as well. And then special teams, Dustin Colquitt, I think one of the best punters in the league. His average is through the roof. And obviously Orion Suckup, who is, probably the exact opposite. He basically gave the Chargers a trip to the playoffs with a miss wide left. And It's the last pick of the draft a few years ago. I forget what you call that. But special teams, I think, is below par.
I think, what grade are you giving them?
I'm giving the special teams as a whole, especially when you look at the punt return and kick return battle. Niall Davis is your starter. I think a C-.
I'll give him a D+. You say C-, I'll give him a D+. And without Dexter McCluster, I don't think that special teams is going to be the same for a while.
The last pick of the draft, what's the name that you call that? Isn't it Irrelevant? Mr. Irrelevant. That's basically, you can put that title over every special teams player for the Chiefs. But nevertheless, Kansas City as a whole is about a B-, C+ football team. Wouldn't you agree? That's about an 80% on a grade.
I think that's pretty good. I think this team is about a B- average on the offense and defensive side. And
They
this
have
team's going to
great
struggle. This
players,
team is
and
going to
they have
struggle this
positions where
season.
it's,
They're going to struggle this season, Nick.
What'd you say?
They're going to struggle this season.
That's right.
They're going
That's
against
right.
some good competition. I can't wait to see how this team reacts to it. And you just saw in that last week how they went up 2-5. How they had to react to that when they had 3 straight losses. And they couldn't beat Denver they couldn't beat San Diego.
I mean, this is a team down the stretch that just did not look all that impressive, and I don't think that they can reach the next level with a receiving core that bad and a defense that I really don't know who's going to step up at the corner, and, I mean, I guess the safety spot outside of an Eric Berry. I mean, two basically of the biggest positions that they have yet to address is the receiving core and that secondary, something that the Seahawks do a little bit better at. That's why they won the Super Bowl.
And Nick, let's recap. Let's recap this depth chart. Who do you think is going to be the best player on this depth chart?
A best player overall, I think, yet again, will have to be a Jamal Charles. But look out for basically one of the up-and-coming stars in the league, none other than a Justin Houston. I think he's going to come into this year and really make an impact and become one of the better players in the league on that defensive side, especially when you have Dontari Poe creating big-time holes for that linebacker.
Nick, I think the best player for this squad is going to be on the offensive side, Jamal Charles, because this guy's made the biggest impact for this offense last season. I think he's going to do it again. And I would say under the radar, I want to. Okay, this is actually a really good question. I think I'm going to say Justin Houston too, because this guy had 11 sacks last season. I think this guy's going to be just a lot better. I think he's really going to improve, and I think he's going to get 2 more sacks next season.
Obviously, this Kansas City team defensively looks really good. They ranked 6th in the league, only allowing 19 points a game, and they had to play that potent AFC West. Of course, the rest of their schedule was relatively soft, but I mean, when you take a look at Kansas City, they have a chance to really do some things extremely well. Kansas City, basically, if you have no receivers or no secondary, this is one of the better teams in the league. But obviously, it's a passing league, and they don't do a good job of that, which really handicaps a Andy Reid, where your quarterback isn't all that great either.
And Nick, I know we got to do one more topic here. What was the best free agent signing for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Free agent signing has to be I'm going to agree with you. Obviously, Hussein Abdullah was great, but the offensive lineman and Jeffrey Lickenbach may come in there, and that offensive line may look really good there, as he's going to do some pretty good things alongside an Eric Fisher. I think he's not only the free agent acquisition, but potentially the under-the-radar free agent acquisition in the NFL. I think he has that kind of potential, especially with that sort of an offense there to go alongside him.
I think it's going to help, especially with all the competition you have in this schedule. And Jeff Lickenbach's really just going to help out that O-line against some really hard. You're going to go against some hard D-lines in this schedule. You think about it, you have the Niners, you got the Seahawks, etc. You have a lot of teams you're going to be looking at. And that's what we're going to be covering next. But first, we're going to be taking a commercial break. You've been listening to NFL Team Breakdowns with Nick Rice and Robert Dieters. This is our 6th edition. We'll be back right after this commercial break.
You are listening to NFL Team Breakdowns on the National Sports Radio Station and on Spreaker.com.
Yeah, I'm the only one to get the job done. I don't know anyone that can cover for me. Yeah, got some game from my dad. She might say she love me, she don't love me like she say she love me. Believe me. I let the boy they love me in the street. I'm not trying to find nobody else to be. I'm the one they couldn't see because they are. Believe me. Yeah. Real. It's been me and Young Tune off the rip.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NFL Team Breakdowns. I'm Robert Diaz alongside me, Nick Rice, for another night of talking NFL football. And we're talking about the Chiefs and the AFC West. We just recapped the depth charts, the 2014 draft signings, and we talked about the draft class, 2014. And Nick, this is our favorite part of the show. You want to tell them what we're going to do?
We might take a look at that schedule and tell you what exactly the Chiefs are going to be doing next year. You don't need to wait until late December. We're going to tell you right now what the Chiefs are going to be doing, what their record's going to look like this year. Game by game.
All right, Nick, we're going to get started here. I don't know why NFL Primetime Extended Version isn't working on Spreaker, but you know what? We're going to get started without it anyway. Nick, week 1, they're going to be at home versus Tennessee. They're going to get the win. That's going to be 1-0 start.
Going to have to agree with you. Kansas City just a much better team, and one thing that helps Kansas City is that the Titan receiving game looks awfully poor, which is going to help the Chiefs get out to a huge lead against Jake Locker or whoever is going to be starting with Tennessee at quarterback.
All right, that's going to be a 1-0 start and get their first win at home. Nick, they travel to Denver, and I think they're going to struggle here, and it's going to be a 1-1 start for the Chiefs.
Going to have to agree with you, as Denver basically has had their number for quite some time. They do it again at Mile High.
All right, let's move on to week 3, and they're going to be at Miami. I think they get the win here, even though Miami's a tough football team. They get the big win.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real nice outing there for Andy Reid. In September, he's fantastic, and he comes through again.
All right, let's move on to September 29th against the New England Patriots at home. Nick, this was a toss-up, but I think they're going to lose that game. I think New England's going to come out firing, and they have a good veteran leadership down there.
Yeah, here's where we disagree. In New England, at home on Monday Night Football, you know Andy Reid's going to have a thing or two up their sleeve. The Patriots are going to struggle early, and that's really going to help these Chiefs. I give them the win and a 3-1 start after Monday Night Football.
So far, I got them at 2-2. Let's move on to at San Francisco. And Nick, Alex Smith is coming back to the Bay, and I don't see him getting the win, so that's going to be a 2-3 start for me.
Yeah, I think that basically Alex Smith's going to have no answer for that elite San Francisco defense. A big-time loss right before the bye.
All right, let's move on. They're going to have a bye week, and then they're going to go play at San Diego. And Nick, this was a toss-up, but I mean, Andy Reid's good at coming back after byes, and I think they're going to get the win over San Diego.
I'm going to have to agree with you. Actually, the Chargers, while they have won and are 2-0 against the Chiefs, it looked awfully ugly, and I think Kansas City, they have 14 days to prepare, and the Chargers have a long trip ahead of them. They get the big-time win due to the Chiefs and go, in my mind, 4-2 at the beginning.
All right, we're at the halfway point with this season at Week 8. They're going to be playing St. Louis at home, and Nick, they get the win.
Going to have to agree with you. They get off to a real hot start and come through with the big-time victory. St. Louis didn't see it coming. They lose again.
All right, now we got a Week 9. The New York Jets are in town against the Kansas City Chiefs, and Nick, they get the win.
Yeah, I think they get the win as well. The Jets just do not match up very well against Kansas City, and it's going to be yet another win streak for the Chiefs. 3-0, both of us say, going into Week 10.
All right, let's move on. Let's go to at Buffalo, and Nick, I think they're going to get the win too, so give them a 4-game winning streak.
Yeah, going to have to agree with you one more time. Just too much firepower there for Kansas City.
And Nick, let's move to versus Seattle at home. And Nick, this is a great defensive team, and if you're only a target Jamal Charles, you're not going to win that game, so I'm going to give them the loss.
Going to have to agree with you. I think this is a shoe-in as the Seahawks go into Week 11. It's going to be at home, but Kansas City's going to have no answer for that pass rush.
Even though Oakland lost 2 games last season against the Kansas City Chiefs, I think this defense got a lot better with the Justin Tuck, and that's going to be pressuring Alex Smith. I think Oakland actually will get the win.
Yeah, going to have to agree with you again. I think at Oakland, and that's going to be a big game for the Raiders because they could be in the playoff hunt, maybe on the outside though, but they have a shot to really make some hay, and I think they do so on NFL Network. It's going to be a fun to watch game.
All right, let's go to. They do play Denver at home, and Nick, I don't see them beating Denver this season, so they're going to get swept, and they're going to be 6-6.
and that makes a 3-game losing streak for both of us. We just think that it's the Chiefs that don't have enough already there. Then when the Broncos had extra free agents, not a chance against Denver, especially it's going to be right next to that Bronco Mile High Stadium.
All right, Nick, let's go to at Arizona, and I believe they get the win here. I think, well, especially now you have a 1-year suspended. You have a player suspended, Darrell Washington, for a year, and I think they're going to get the win over Arizona, and they're going to end that losing streak.
I predicted that they would lose, and I'm going to stick to it because I just think that the Chiefs aren't going to have enough firepower there against the Cardinals.
All right, let's move on. They do play Oakland at home, and Nick, I think this is where they get their revenge on Oakland and get the win, and they're going to be 8-6.
Yeah, I think the Raiders really are demoralized, and they are unable, following a couple games, maybe a couple losses, they could be out of the playoffs, and the Chiefs come through with the win.
All right, let's go to an up-and-coming team. Let's go with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Nick, I think this team's going to get the win, especially at Pittsburgh.
Going to have to give them a loss there. The Steelers could be playing for a playoff spot, and Mike Tomlin and company may have a real nice 2014 year. Look for the Steelers in the 2014 playoffs, and the Chiefs, with a loss, are out of it.
I mean, I give the Chiefs a loss is what I meant to say, so I have 8-7, and we're going to make that push go, and we're going to go to the last week against San Diego. The last time these guys met was Week 17. The Chargers got a big win in overtime, and that's what's probably going to happen again. I had the Chiefs ending their record in an 8-8 fashion.
Yeah, I give the Chiefs the loss as well against San Diego. The Chargers are pushed into the postseason. Back-to-back Week 17 victories for San Diego.
All right, Nick. Well, we predicted our schedules, and Nick, I ended up with 8-8. What about you?
I ended up with, I think it was 7-9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, I predicted 8 games. Wow, what a surprise.
Oh, wow. Well, we just predicted, I think it was only a 1-game. I think it was a 2-game difference.
Yeah, we have always agreed on just about everything, and we do so again. The Chiefs went 11-5. They're not a horrible team, especially because that offensive and defensive front is so good. Don Terry Poe and Eric Fisher leading the charge, but, I mean, you're not going to win a championship with a receiving core consisting of Junior Hemingway and Donnie Avery. And then the defensive side, your best defensive player outside of Eric Berry potentially is a former Dolphin release, Sean Smith. I don't think so.
And just, we're going to go to final thoughts here. I know we might have a call-in sooner or later. Jake Laker might call into the show about the Chiefs, but I think yeah, I know exactly. It's going to be interesting to have him on. But I think this defense, I think they're going to struggle, and it's just because this team isn't going to stop a lot of running games. And when you look at the schedule, I mean, you're going against, you got Seattle. Denver doesn't really have a running game. It's more of a passing game. Tennessee lost Chris Johnson. But you have Danny Woodhead at San Diego, who's actually been progressing over time. St. Louis is really going to struggle in that department, but you also have New York. You have the New York Jets who have a Chris Johnson. I think they'll get the win there. And then you have Oakland with a Darren McFadden and a Maurice Jones-Drew. You have Le'Veon Bell at Pittsburgh Steelers, and then you have a Bruce Ellington at Arizona Cardinals. I mean, maybe that's not elite running backs. We also have San Francisco with a Frank Gore, and I think they have to go against SF and Seattle. I think that's going to be their toughest competition, and Denver. So I think those 3 teams are their toughest competition with New England as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of these sites that hold that hold some of the predictions for the 2014 season, and Chiefs.com, you would think that they would have the Kansas City Ball Club at 16-0. Well, they don't. And actually, they have them at 9-7, which is right around our ballpark. And actually, BleacherReport.com has them at about 9-7 as well, which, I mean, plays right into our discussion here that this team potentially just took a pretty big step backward, not only with the lack of free agent acquisitions, but they haven't addressed any of the needs in either free agency or the draft. That offseason was one of the more disappointing last few months there for any ball club, Kansas City, basically only through free agency and that 3-day thing in late April, early May, only got 2 starters penciled in, but they lost a heck of a lot more than that. And I don't think that they have the talent to compensate. And Robert, I think this may be a long year for Kansas City again in that AFC West.
Well, despite we have a great caller on the line right now. We have Jake Laker. Jake, how's it going, man?
It's going well. It's a little past 11 o'clock here, actually, but, I'm not really tired yet. But summer started, and it means 1 week closer to football season, so that's always good news.
What do you have? What questions do you have about the Chiefs?
What questions do I have? Or comments? Or really just,
Any concerns you have, or just...
a lot of concerns.
Well, there is a lot of concerns, especially with the team. Especially with a team that's going in a tough competition.
Well, the team's got tough competition. Here's the thing. I had a lot of faith in this team going into the postseason last year. And to be quite honest, I thought the Denver Broncos, let alone the Indianapolis Colts. And however, they were decimated with. For a team that stayed fairly healthy all season, they were decimated with injuries by the second half of that game, and that really played a big part into that epic collapse, if you will, of that team. And as soon as they lost that game, I was like, this team can win the AFC. And then I saw what happened in free agency, and then I saw what happened in the draft, and I have lost so much faith in the Kansas City Chiefs. This team, and that's probably the worst draft in the AFC.
I would have to agree with you, man. And actually, if basically you take out the 9-0 start, this looked like the real sub-average football team. And also, one more thing I want to throw at you, with basically not only pads your argument but puts it to bed, is that outside of points per game, the Chiefs ranked bottom 10 in close to every real important category. Turnover differential is another story, but yards given up on offense and defense was bottom 10 outside of the running game, obviously, and the first downs were off the charts in favor of their opponents. And I think overall, Kansas City, potentially the worst 11-5 team from a season ago.
It wouldn't surprise me again they had an easy schedule to start the year. Look, I'm not going to take any credit away from them. They did go 9-0, and no one's going to take that away from them. They did go 11-5, and they did make the playoffs in a nice turnaround. But we saw Andy Reid be Andy Reid again. I sort of sympathized with Eagles fans who always complained about them. I thought they were just being ungrateful, but he just makes these questionable decisions, especially when it comes to a clock management. Well, so while I do think that turnover margin is a key part. This is a textbook example of one stat isn't enough for any team. But turnover margin does go a long way once you're healthy. If you have a good draft and you have a good free agency season, match that with a good. Really, you really need a great quarterback. Look at Tampa Bay. I think they're going to be a fantastic team this year because they did well for agency. They had a great draft, and even last season, they had one of the best turnover margins in the league. But this is about Kansas City. And what Kansas City has done, not only, I feel like once they lost to Indianapolis, it was all downhill from there. Because I have yet to see a decision that has impressed me, or really something that I'm just not playing in. Even the players themselves are losing motivation, and that's a key element in any sport. Tom Brady has gained a lot of weight, reportedly, which is why they had to draft Dee Ford in the first round. Just everything is really falling down for the Chiefs, and I have to just feel bad for their fans because they have waited a very long time. That was the most heartbreaking way to go out.
Actually, I have one more question for you, Jake, and I may send it back over to Robert. Alex Smith, is he your franchise guy under center?
You know what? I still believe that the 49ers are going to regret getting rid of Alex Smith, and we call him Kaepernick. I think that Alex Smith does have the potential to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I really do. It's not a popular opinion, but he absolutely has the potential to do so. So I think that, he's not the best quarterback in the league. He's not an elite quarterback, as Joe Flacco's agent would say. But in this case, I think that he is enough, and he is not the problem. There are so many other areas that are problems. You have aging players, you have players that are not motivated, you have a decimated wide receiving core, and it needs to change. Alex Smith is not the problem at all. As a matter of fact, he is the only thing that seems to be a constant in this franchise.
And Jake, one more question before you go. You look at their big concerns with the wide receiver and corners. What do you think the reason is behind the Kansas City Chiefs not really addressing that situation?
Well, the problem was, again, you take from the very beginning. We start at the beginning of the draft, and D4 gets drafted, and I was shocked by this. I couldn't believe it. I mean, defense was really where they desperately need to work on, except for cornerback. But I thought it was no brainer. You go with a wide receiver there, especially with the depth of the wide receiver class and the plethora of talent that they could have selected. With that, I believe it was the 22nd or 23rd pick, perhaps the 24th. And they went with D4. Later, we find out it's Tamba Ali has gotten overweight, and you don't want to have to take a first pick because some guy is not picking up his weight, and he's not carrying his weight. He's gaining his weight, and that's why they had to take for it. To be honest, I'm as dumbfounded as the next guy for why they have not addressed their biggest issue. I'm really just disappointed because I thought this team had a lot of ability, a lot of potential to make a deep run, but the wide receiving core, there's just no depth there. The rainbow is great. I mean, you have guys stepping up, but you can't have such a drastic drop-off. Depth is key in the National Football League, and Kansas City is trending in the wrong direction, and that direction is down to a place that you do not want to be in the AFC West, where all of the three teams seem to be on the rise.
All right, thanks, Jake, so much for being on our show. And, the Chiefs, I just believe that this team, they're going to be – we predicted 8-8, me and Nick.
Yeah, after listening to that, I may want to put them at 1-15. Holy cow. I mean, guys getting overweight, not even reporting to camp. Golly, that's just a real tough situation.
Whoa.
We think they win half their games, but then – when you take a second look at it, Andy Reid's one of the best coaches in the league, and Alex Smith, not only is he good, but he elevates his play towards the end of games and in the playoffs. I mean, over the last 4 years, have you seen how good he did with San Francisco? And then with the Chiefs, they didn't lose that game on offense, by the way, with the Colts. Many want to blame, well, they weren't able to move the chains late in the game. Well, shoot, when you put up 38 points, Alex Smith should be on the bench, resting and ready for next week. I mean, that was a real atrocious defensive performance. But overall, Robert, I mean, shoot. I mean, that says it all right there. They're trending down in a division that's trending up.
We want to say thanks to Jake. He had to go, but he had some really good on it. Like, he had some great contribution to this show. And, Nick, it's gonna be really interesting to me how this team does. I mean, I understand this team has its mismatches, but they are heading in the wrong direction in the next couple of years. And like,
what's a real shame
let's just say, for
Jamal
example,
Charles is going to have to be really good again for them to have a chance.
Let's remember what Green Bay did. They drafted 3 wide receivers. Why didn't the Chiefs do that? Green Bay had a good, I think they had a pretty solid wide receiver core. And now they just drafted more people. And now the Chiefs don't do anything about it.
Yeah, going into this, basically this was the best NFL draft, reportedly, and I mean deservedly so. Best draft in the last 10 years at a couple positions. Obviously not quarterback, but at offensive line, at wide receiver, and also, basically, there were some real good linebackers outside of a D Ford, who was basically one of the more overrated linebackers in the draft. And I think the Chiefs, they basically hit every wrong hole. They draft another running back who will be nothing more than a backup for a number of years, given that Jamal Charles and Niall Davis don't get hurt. Basically, their running back core is set. And then they draft yet another defensive end with question marks, too, albeit. They don't address the main concerns outside of their third-round pick, who I'm still having big-time concerns on. I mean, the jury's still out on him. And I think overall this team just has real strength at the wrong positions.
The Kansas City Chiefs, I think the reason behind the running back in DeAnthony Thomas was they don't really want to pay, like they're already paying a Jamal Charles. And
Right.
when you have to pay Jamal Charles, that's a lot of money. And if you draft one, you don't have to pay a ton of money. You save money by signing DeAnthony Thomas, which is I think it's a smart idea for them, but I mean it wasn't a big need. I think you could have gone for like a 6th round running back. I mean, look with the Niners, they got a Carlos Hyde. And I didn't think that was a smart decision, but when you look at it, Frank Gore is aging, and they do need another running back to step up. And one guy that's gonna be on the market, and I think teams are gonna look at is Michael James. I mean, a guy that's maybe underrated, but I think Michael James could make an impact anywhere he goes.
I think for the Chiefs to be good, they have to snag Jermichael Finley. I mean, that's the only way they're going to be good.
I think they should, but, they're probably not. They're probably not, though. Because
they should put all the money on the table. They should basically offer him Bank of America if he can come over to Kansas City. He would be basically one of the better players on the offense for the next 5 years. Barring injury, they have an Anthony Fasano behind him, and that tight end position and that receiving core immediately upgrades from what we have as a C or a C minus up to about a B or maybe even a B plus. I mean, when you add a Jermichael Finley who can play the slot, play tight end, play H-back, this guy can do it all and can really play well. I think this offense takes a step up when, I mean, basically outside of a top 5 or top 10 running game, overall, the offense looked pretty lethargic, especially going 2-6 down the stretch.
I like your vocab right there, lethargic. I like it. I like how you use that, but
you're going to hear a lot of that this year for Kansas City.
Jamal Charles is going to be on beast mode this season. He's probably going to be the only thing that's going to be going for the offense. Defense, in a way, you have a pretty stacked linebacking core that's really got to carry that team. And okay, well, I'm just going to go my last thoughts on this team. I think this team is going to I think the offense is going to be Jamal Charles, pretty much, and that defense is all the linebackers. That's about it for this team. They're a B-minus team, and I think they're just going to go down for years to come, unless they can have a good draft next season. They can draft a good wide receiver. They can draft a good corner next season. This team could. This team
towards the top, so they have a chance. But basically, and one thing I'm going to be probably listening to this show back again at the end of the year. But one thing I guess I want to hear before we go, Robert, your bold prediction of 2013. I mean, we're talking bold, triple font, size 50 times New Roman, I guess, or you can go complete bold. And what do you think is the real outstanding position for 2014?
For 2014, the running back position, and
bold prediction,
running back position.
Well, I was going to say along the lines of what you think might happen. What I think will happen, and this may.
Oh, whoa! Can you repeat your question?
Surprise people.
Can you repeat your question?
Kansas City defensively next year will be one of the worst in the NFL. One of the worst next year, statistically and overall on paper. I mean, they just don't look good, and they barely beat teams like the Raiders and Browns and Bills. I mean, I think next year, this defense may look one of the worst in the NFL, drugged all over the field. That's my bold prediction.
What did you say? Like, what was going to be their what was going to be their next season going to be like?
2014. We're talking 2014, brother.
We're still in this year. I think the cornerback position is going to look awful, but their defense does give up a lot of points. That is true, because I mean, when you look back at it, the 2013 season didn't look all that special to you. I mean, they did. I mean, their defense isn't that great. I mean, congratulations, you're a good pass rush team. You can get to the QB. But besides that, when you give up 41 points to the San Diego Chargers, you give up 35 points to Denver.
Colts in the playoffs.
Oh, you gave up 31 points to the Oakland Raiders. I mean, the most point. Okay, so their defense didn't look too bad going in week 1 through 9 because the most points they gave up was 17, and they tied that twice against Tennessee and Cleveland. But still, that's Tennessee and Cleveland. But, I mean, they only gave up 7 points against the New York Giants, but they were awful. By that point, they were 0-6 week 1 through 6. But when you give up, let's see, the highest, they gave up 38 points was their highest, and that was they gave up
45 to the Colts.
45.
One thing real quick to hammer our.
That's in the playoffs, though. I'm talking about regular season, though. I was going to say.
Playoffs count, too. Colts
okay, playoffs count.
Wayne, it was Luck who had 29 of 45 passing for 443 yards and 4 touchdowns. That was against, quote-unquote, great Chiefs team. Donald Brown averaged 5 yards a carry. Luck ran for 50 yards against the Colts. And obviously T.Y. Hilton, 13 catches, 220.
Because he's the only wide receiver that was in that game because they didn't have a Reggie Wayne.
I mean, I don't think it matters.
That's still true. And you saw Andrew Luck the next game blew it because he was the only wide receiver he had was T.Y. and he was he had double coverage on him the next game.
Boy, I mean, it was a turnaround. Indianapolis next week, they played card. They played the Chiefs. Divisional round.
I want to say Denver, right?
Yeah, I think they played Denver, but nevertheless.
Yeah, they played Denver.
Nevertheless.
Oh no, they played New England. They lost 43-22.
Yeah, because New England's a better defense overall. Bold prediction: Chiefs will be one of the worst defenses in the league next year. Everyone thinks that defense top 5. I don't think so.
They're gonna be good They're good at getting the sacks, but besides that,
they may be decent there.
Besides that, nah.
Yeah, they're gonna be drugged them all over.
They're gonna be like
defense didn't look great.
I think they're gonna be top. I think they're gonna be one of the top 10 worst defense. I don't think they're gonna make top 5 just yet. But I think they're going to make a top 10.
Yeah,
they're going to make a top 10.
8-8 may be real generous there. I mean, we may make an overall, not even maybe, we will tune into Spreaker.com in the later months. We'll give an overall NFL seasons prediction show. And I could say right now it'll be great, but I think towards the beginning of the year we may tweak these schedules just a little bit. But in the meantime, Kansas City, one of, I think, 3 teams that we predicted they're on NFL team breakdowns to go 8-8, including those Jets. And I think the Cardinals either were 9-7 or 8-8, which basically means that every team is in for the run in this year.
And Oakland could have a shot to maybe get a couple of wins this season. You never know with a veteran team, and I think Oakland Raiders might be a one-year team. But Nick, I can't wait to talk about the Chargers, but let's move on. We're going to do this. We're just going to do one quick NBA final update. 110-95, the San Antonio Spurs get a big win. And Nick, you got to be pretty happy if you're a San Antonio Spurs fan because when you have a 1-game lead over the Miami Heat, you are happy. And I'm a happy guy too. I like the Spurs in this series, but I know Miami might win it. But I mean, the Spurs just really just won this game and surprised a lot of people, but also LeBron James came out with some cramping, but this was a pretty good game overall. I mean, I watched some of it, but I mean, it was when the Spurs were just hitting their threes.
I think the Heat are going to be in big time trouble. I'm a big time Miami fan, but prediction, I think San Antonio wins in 6 because this team just is. I think they didn't take a step back, and the Heat are looking old, and I think they're going to really regret not getting some sort of player in free agency that's going to help all that youth there on that San Antonio offensive attack, especially that Green kid. He looks good.
And, with the top performers of that game, I would Manu Ginobili with a double-double. And he had 16 points, 11 assists, and he kept on moving around that ball. And Ginobili was like the bust last season. He didn't do very well in the playoffs, didn't perform very well, and now he comes back, and I think Ginobili is going to make the biggest difference for the Spurs on the bench.
Yeah, and if there's a hobbled LeBron who has no clue what to do on defense there with an injury, it's going to be a long series there for the Miami Heat, especially even if the air conditioning is working perfectly fine.
Oh, my. That whole air conditioning thing is just hilarious. It doesn't matter if the air conditioner's not working. You work in the heat. That's how football players do it. Football
Right. Yeah,
players
you
have to
think
work in some of that heat, especially when you could be in Arizona, you could be in Carolina, you could be anywhere, and you gotta work in that heat.
do you really think that basketball is a glorified sport? That basically sums it up right there.
You get air conditioning there. You get
Yeah,
that cool
every
breeze.
post-game question there for Spoelstra was about the heat based off of no air conditioning, and I'm pretty sure all the fans could deal just fine too.
It's the Miami Heat. You guys are supposed to deal with the heat, but you guys lose to
That's basically what
Spurs.
they're doing. I mean, leading up to going to the NBA, practicing all over in the heat every day. Yeah, interesting.
They dropped game one. I'm a little shocked. I'm scared for the Heat right now. But right now, I have the Heat winning in game 7. I think this series could go all the way to game 7, but I think the Heat really have to come out and bring some intensity. And
If they
for
win
Danny
game
Green,
2, then they have a shot. Losing the game 2, that may be a little too much, but we'll see. We'll see, man. I think Miami's going to come back and come back strong.
all right, Nick, we're gonna end out the show here. Check us out on Facebook on NFL Team Breakdowns. Also, check out National Sports Network with our website, nationalsportsradio.com. Our Twitter is at National Sports Radio. Jacob Seuss is on that and always tweets every day. It's pretty convenient. And Nick Rice is in charge of the Facebook page. He always posts a new show, and we hope you enjoyed the Kansas City Chiefs, and we'll be covering another AFC West team. I believe it's probably gonna be this weekend. I'm gonna say, Nick, I'm probably gonna say Sunday.
Sunday night, make sure to tune in. Spreaker.com again. The Chargers beat 4 playoff teams during the 2013 season, including those Kansas City Chiefs 2 times in a row. And they're going to try and do it again one more time. This time, it's going to be for the right to play for basically the top wild card spot. Can they do it? I guess Sunday night we'll have the answer.
Well, we want to thank all of you for listening. And Nick, you want to do your motto? End it out.
A motto? What are you talking about?
You know the motto.
You already know?
You already know. Come on.
Do you want a photo? YOLO? What's the deal?
You know the don't drink, don't drive. Come on, dude. That's
don't
you.
drink and drive, or don't drink at all, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good night and a safe weekend coming up.